Hey everybody, welcome to Two Sum, or should I say, hello Maisam, welcome to Two Sum. So let's read this question. Given an array of integer nums, this is our array, our parameter. It is an integer nums. It is an array of numbers and an integer target. Return two indices of the two numbers such that they add up to the target. You may assume that each input would have exactly one solution, and you may not use the same element twice. You can return the answer in any order. So here we have nums 2, 7, 11, 15. Target is 9. We're returning the indices 0 and 1 because 2 plus 7 equal 9, and their indices for 2 is 0 and 7 is 1 respectively. And we have the explanation right here. So we have to take into account that we can't use the same element twice. So for example, if we had an array and we had 2 in it and the target was 4, we can't do 2 and 2. We can't do 0 and 0, right? Because we can't use the same element twice. Even though it would work, right, in a sense, but we can't use the same element twice. So one way we can do this is we can do it using a hash table. So const hash equals an object literal, which we know can have property methods, key value pairs. So we can first iterate through our for loop, I less than nums.length. We're using the length property that is part of the array prototype, and then I++, and all we're going to do is we're going to extract the value. So let value equal to nums at index I. So we're going to extract the value, for example, 2, and then we're going to populate our hash map where the hash's key is going to be the value. So the hash key is going to be the value, so 2, and we're going to map that to its indice. So we're going to map the key's value to the indice where it's at. So we're going to basically populate our hash map with our entire array, where the key is going to be the value in the array, and then the key's value is going to be the indices in the array. So it would look kind of like this. It would have like 2 mapped to the indices 0. You'd have 7 mapped to the indices 1. You'd have 11 mapped to the indices 2. You had 15 mapped to the indice 3. So this is what we're doing basically in this for loop. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go and do another for loop. And this time we are going to create a check. Let check is going to equal to, we're going to take our target. So for example, in this case was 9, and we're going to subtract it by any element as we iterate through our array, nums at I. For example, 2, 9 minus 2 is 7. And now we're going to check if our hash table has this key, 7. Oh, look, it does, right? Because now we know that 7 plus 2, we're basically just checking the reverse by doing subtraction, but we're checking that 9 minus, for example, 2 is 7. 7 is in our hash table, so we can't technically use 7 and 2 to get to our target. Those are the two numbers. And as you can see, we have it right here, hash check, right? Hash, we're checking if this value is in our hash table. And now we're going to do a short circuit and statement, where basically we're saying this is truthy. We're going to execute our next statement, which our next statement is just going to be checking to make sure that hash at check, okay, which in this case is hash check key, we're retrieving the value from it, which is the indice 1, does not equal to I. We're basically just checking that the indices don't match because we can't use the same element twice. Because they don't match, we can just return our array of indices, which is going to be I, and hash check, which is, again, we're accessing the value from the key, which is going to be the indice. And let's run it. And there is a syntax error because I wrote int, which is not the correct way because JavaScript is weakly typed. Which means we don't write out the type. It's let. I don't know why I wrote int. It's let or const or whatever, depending on the situation. Or var. Okay, so there we go. Accepted, 0 milliseconds, very optimal than the brute force method, which would have been to do a nested for loop, which would have been O of n squared time complexity. But since we're doing just 2 for loops, not nested, this is O of n time complexity. However, the space complexity is O of n because we're creating a hash function that is relative to our array. So it is more memory, but the brute force would have been less memory. So kind of this is a trade-off. It just depends which one you use. But that's the solution. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. And yeah.